Today we're gonna talk about the 4 lessons we learned on our very first house flip. Hey guys, I'm Ariane and this is my better half, Chris. If you're new to the channel, we have been talking about how we retired at the age of 27 with passive income from real estate investing, and this is actually part 5 of that series where we walk through step by step what we actually did from the beginning to how we retired at 27. Today we're gonna talk about our very first house flip. So Chris, can you recap on how we got here?
Yep, so for people who haven't been watching, we first bought our first rental property and we were our first tenants, used a delayed finance exemption to get that same money to use to buy our second rental property, which already had a tenant in it, so we kind of took a shortcut there. They were already going. Delayed finance exemption again, used that same money to buy the third rental property, which brings us to our first lesson.
So the first lesson is have multiple exit strategies. So whenever you're investing in a real estate property, you want to make sure that you're not stuck at like one single plan for that property. One potential strategy or exit strategy is to rent the property out and have cash flow, right? That's one. Another potential exit strategy is to sell it and make money that way. So what actually happened with this third rental property that we bought was initially we thought we could do the same thing we did on the first 2 rental properties. And if you remember, both of them didn't need a whole lot of work. We pretty much bought them and moved into the first one. The second one, we bought it. There was already a tenant who was happily paying, I think it's $975 a month, and they were happy to stay and keep paying us. So those didn't need any work at all. Now the third one, we thought it wouldn't need a lot of work, or we thought maybe we could do some of the work, which you'll learn at one of the lessons later. But once we actually closed on it, we saw that it needed a lot more work than we expected. We initially thought we only needed to spend $10,000 to $20,000, but once we uncovered a lot of things, like when you start taking out flooring and taking out sheetrock and drywall and all that things, you find a lot of things that might be wrong. So we saw that we couldn't do the same strategy where we pull out all of our money back, because with the delayed financing strategy, you can only actually get back the initial investment you put in. So we bought this one for $77,000, and initially we thought we were going to spend $10,000 or $20,000 on the rehab, the renovation, but it ended up being more like $40,000.
Wow, this is a disaster.
And we didn't even have $40,000 extra after we paid $77,000 cash for the property. So we had to shift, because if we didn't shift, we were going to be stuck and we wouldn't have money to keep using to keep investing. So we decided that we were just going to flip this property, get all our cash back, and then keep doing what we were doing before. That's something to keep in mind when you're investing. You don't want to be stuck and be forced to do something even if things change. When you're thinking about rentals, I know right now people are looking at a lot of different ways to rent properties out. Maybe your first plan is to use the property as a short-term rental. If you're buying a short-term rental right now, you want that short-term rental to also be able to be used as a long-term rental, so you're not stuck in just the short-term rental exit strategy.
So again, we did not have the money, so that brings us to lesson 2. If you have a good enough deal, it's pretty easy to find someone else to work with you on that property to make sure that you can actually make it happen, right? We did not have that money because we used all of our cash to actually buy the property. We had a little bit of extra that we were expecting for the original plan, but it wasn't nearly enough to get it to flip standards. So I reached out to my network, happened to have a really awesome coworker who may watch, who lent us money. Had no business lending us money. It was our very first flip. We had no experience, so he took a big chance on us. Worked out for both parties. 3 or 4 months later, we had flipped this property. He made a really solid return. We made a really solid return. Good to go.
Right, and that was our very first private investor, right?
Yeah.
Like we partnered together, and that investor made a really good return in the double digits, and I think a lot more because we actually gave him a profit split, since that was our very first
He was taking
flip.
a chance on us.
Right, so he made a lot more than he normally would. So that was a really great experience, and it helped us see that if there's a good deal, right? So for that particular flip, I think the profit was somewhere between $30,000 and $40,000 after we sold it and it all was said and done, we could obviously pay our partner investor some of that, right? And yes, we would part with a portion of those profits, but we didn't have the money to do it.
Yeah. And a piece of something is better than 100% of nothing, right?
Right. So when you're looking at deals and if you're like, oh, I don't have enough money, maybe you have some of the money, maybe you don't have all of the money. If you can do it, right? Like you have to be competent and willing to do the work to actually get this project through the finish line and have a profit at the end. Well, you can give some of that profit to someone who does have a money, a partner, an investor who does have the money.
And it's not just money. It could be a skill set, right? Somebody could be really good at, let's say that one of your friends is an actual carpenter, right? They could hang the cabinets, right? And that's part of the piece that you're missing, and that's how partnerships are formed, right?
That is a great segue to our third lesson, which is sometimes doing things yourselves is not always the smartest choice and can actually lose you money.
What? I'm doing it myself. We're going to save money, right?
No. So for this property, like we kind of alluded to earlier, we thought we could just do it with like $10,000 in the beginning. And part of that initial estimate was because we thought, oh, we could just paint the cabinets and we can hang the backsplash and we can paint all these other things too. Maybe we can put the flooring on too, right? So we were just kind of budgeting for materials,
right? Yeah.
For a lot of it. But we quickly realized after we took on like one of the small projects, which was painting the cabinets, that it took us a lot of time. And I think Chris, maybe, did you paint cabinets before?
I had not painted cabinets before, but I had done backsplash and flooring before.
Right. So Chris has done something. So, we were just like, oh yeah, this will be nothing.
I painted walls before. How much different is it than painting a wall?
Right.
Wait.
This may be harder than you think.
But apparently it took a lot of time and we realized that, we actually can't do all of this. So thankfully, as we started painting the cabinets, we realized that we had to hire the other stuff out. So we did hire out painting the walls and flooring and everything else. We just kept painting the cabinets and putting up the backsplash. But that project took about 4 weeks, I think.
And in hindsight, we shouldn't have kept the pieces that we kept. It was a whole lot of stress. We were both working our full-time jobs at this point. We hadn't retired yet, right?
Yeah, so we would be working, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., having dinner, then we'd drive an hour to the property.
Work all night,
get home at midnight, past midnight, be so exhausted, and then do
get
it
back
all
up to
over
work.
again. And in hindsight, both of us, we could kind of take on extra hours. Me more so than Chris, right? Like I was a speech language pathologist, so I could pick up a weekend, 4 hours here, 8 hours here. If I had just done that, instead of painting the cabinets, I would have made 5 times the amount.
We could have paid someone to do the cabinets.
Right, of what it would have cost to pay someone to paint the cabinets.
And the time. Like they would have done it so much faster than it took us to do it.
And they would have done it so much better.
Yeah.
Because our painting the cabinets sucked. It was the first time we ever painted cabinets.
Yep.
So someone who did it 20 times would obviously do a lot better than us.
Yeah. And like it took us 2 weekends to put up a backsplash. That probably would have taken someone who knew what they were doing a day, 2 days.
Right. And again, it wasn't that great.
No.
Right?
Yeah. Bad idea.
Yes. But that's just something to think about because I feel like a lot of people aren't specialized at some of the things we try to DIY and we think it's going to save us time and money, but it doesn't actually if you take the time to really be honest with yourself.
And account for your own time, right? We weren't even putting a dollar value on the amount of time we were spending, for sure.
Right.
To your point, like you could have picked up extra hours at work and done so much better than what we saved.
Yeah.
So lesson number 4 here. When we bought this property, we had a WDO inspection, which is one of the things that we do during due diligence. When you're buying all the properties, there's a certain set of inspections that
and
you go through.
WDO means?
Wood-destroying organisms. They look for things like termites and wood rot. So when we bought the property, our WDO, our wood-destroying organism report, came back clean, which meant there were no termites, there was no wood rot, everything was fine. Go to sell the property. The buyer's WDO inspection came back with, it's infested with termites, panic! Ah! So we panicked. We had never dealt with termites before, so this is like the end of the world. We thought we were going to be making some money, and then now it's all gone in our heads, like everything. The world's falling apart. Turns out, not that big a deal. We did have some contingency in our budget, which is the actual lesson here. Have contingency in your renovation budget for the things that show up. When you take down some sheetrock, oh, surprise, there's something behind it. There was a water leak and it's been leaking for the last 10 years. There's mold, right? Almost always, an old house is going to have stuff behind the walls that you can't see until you get into it, right? So we need to make sure we leave some padding in our budget to account for some of those unforeseen gotchas. For this particular story, we hired a contractor. He identified all of the damaged wood, replaced all of the damaged wood, put up all the sheetrock, repainted it, good to go. A month later, we sold the property, no big deal. But the lesson we learned, the very important lesson we learned, is to make sure that you have padding in your budget, this contingency fund for those unforeseen circumstances.
So those were the 4 lessons we learned on our very first flip. Hopefully you got something out of that like we did, and hopefully you don't make the mistakes that we did, or at least not all of them, right? Now, that first flip actually turned out well. We actually made, like I said earlier, somewhere between $30,000 and $40,000. Now, we did expend a lot of our own labor, so technically probably less than that if we had actually paid ourselves something. But hey, you know, that's what it is. And our private investor, our very first private investor, was very happy. He got double-digit returns on that and even a little bit extra because he had a profit split off of that. But that went well. We're actually very blessed and thankful that we actually were profitable on our very first flip. That was an accident, right? Because initially it was supposed to be a rental. It just kind of turned into a flip as we looked at the true numbers. Now, the second flip is actually a complete disaster that we technically broke even on, but actually we probably lost a lot of money because it just took so much of our time.
Especially if you count time, yeah.
So that is the next episode. So if you want to hear a whole lot of
disaster, yeah,
disaster and drama and pain and suffering, that is the episode for you. We actually learned a lot of lessons, so you will hear a lot of lessons from the pain and suffering, but that is a very juicy episode. So make sure you click that subscribe button and the notification bell and like this video so you can be the first people to watch the next video as part of the series on how we retired at the age of 27. All right, guys, we will see you next time.